Hi, this is Chris Castle, and you're listening to Your Morning Coffee, the podcast with Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From Glenn Peoples at Billboard, how to market old artists? A lot like marketing younger artists, survey finds.
And from Tom Roland at Billboard, how country songwriters are combating and adopting artificial intelligence.
And from Daniel Parris at Stat Significant, do music stars write their own songs? A statistical analysis. Well, that's kind of an interesting story. Many interesting stories today. We're glad you're here. We're going to start the show right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air, on the air, on the air, on the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Well, it is so good to see you, Jay, on a lovely Southern California day, bro.
Yeah, it's beautiful this morning. We have a few little tidbits in the news this week that before we get into our big stories I want to talk about. One is that the final round of Grammy voting is now open, and it's open through January 5th. So if you're a voting member of the Academy, now is the time. There was a really great story this week from Roster, R-O-S-T-R, and New Industry Focus. And they launched this new independent voter guide. So with 95 award categories, 497 nominations, and more than 1,000 nominees, voters have a lot to navigate for the 2026 Grammys. So this free interactive guide pulls all the data together. It's in one place to help you make decisions, and there's a link in your morning coffee.
Right. No fluff, no opinion, no glossy photo spreads of the suits behind the scenes, just clear fact-based context that makes it easier to compare nominations, surface overlooked work, and give proper credit to the people behind the projects.
Yeah, this is an independent third-party guide. It's not connected to or endorsed by or affiliated with the Recording Academy or the Grammy Awards, but it sure makes it easy, Mike, when you have so many things to look through. I'm proud to say I'm a voting member of the Academy, and I really look forward every year to going through this, but a tool like this makes it super easy.
Indeed. Recording Academy CEO Harvey Mason Jr. on Billboard's On the Record podcast. The Recording Academy CEO joins Kristen Robinson to talk about the 2026 Grammys, whether K-pop needs its own category, and how he's thinking about AI music.
Yeah, this is one of our favorite podcasts, Kristen Robinson's On the Record. So Harvey Mason's quote-unquote Grammy overhaul, it's really paid off. Over 70% of the Academy's roughly 15,000 voting members have been added since 2019, including a slew of new, more diverse voters from different corners of the world. Among voting members, according to a 2024 membership data report, the percentage of people of color has grown by 65%, while Black or African American membership has grown by 90%.
Yeah, more than 3,000 women have also joined as voting members. In turn, the new membership has voted to create several categories, including Best African Music Performance, Songwriter of the Year, and Best Remixed Recording. So don't miss Kristen Robinson's On the Record podcast. It is a good one to put in the queue.
Yep, absolutely. Another great podcast we listened to this week, this one is from our friends over at SoundCloud, and it's a conversation between Imogen Heap, the Grammy-winning artist and founder of Oracles, and Elias Satan he's the CEO of SoundCloud.
Yeah, it's recorded live in front of a packed crowd at Web Summit 2025 in Lisbon, Portugal. This episode brings Imogen and Elia together for a wide-ranging discussion on ethical AI, creative ownership, and the future of the artist-fan experience. There's a link to the conversation in the Your Morning Coffee newsletter, so do check it out. Very cool.
Yep, and speaking of the Your Morning Coffee newsletter, the lead story this week was this really cool piece by our friend Livia Tortella. Over at Black Box. The headline was Top Artist Brands of the Decade. The artists on their decade's best list strategically navigated their music release plans, fan relationships, and personal narratives to build lasting and recognizable brands in an unpredictable era.
Right. In addition to the one constant, great music, our takeaways on what they all have in common are clear. Number one is community is everything. An artist is only as viable as their connection to a core, urgent fan base. Respect them, listen to them, and be one of them.
Right. And number two, hits are only a statistic. Hit songs come and go overnight, sometimes blowing up years or decades after their initial release. They're always necessary, but a massively successful song can be a death sentence for an artist without a strong identity. A strong brand will keep an artist relevant to their superfans with or without crossover hits.
Right, and transparency equals control. Owning the narrative has been the best risk management tool of the last decade. So you can check out Livia's Best Brands of the Decade link, again, in the Your Morning Coffee newsletter.
Yeah, another piece that really caught our attention this week was from our friend Kristen Robinson over at Billboard, and the headline was Some Spotify users can now personalize their algorithm. So last week on Wednesday, Spotify announced it will now allow users to personalize their algorithm.
Right, so a company blog post reads the following. Imagine a Spotify that doesn't just passively learn from you, but literally listens to you. For the first time, your ideas, your logic, and your creativity can actually power the Spotify algorithm, directing how it thinks, adapts, and responds to you.
Yeah, I found this really interesting. As part of this rollout, the blog post introduces a feature called the quote-unquote prompted playlist. Essentially, this lets users use AI to generate a playlist, a similar concept to Spotify's recent integration with ChatGPT, to allow for prompt-based music and podcast recommendations.
Well, the blog post continues. You could ask for music from my top artists from the last 5 years, then push it further with and feature deep cuts I haven't heard yet. Or you could request high-energy pop and hip-hop for a 30-minute 5K run that keeps a steady pace before easing into relaxing songs for a cool down, and layer on something like include music from this year's biggest films and most talked about TV shows that match my taste. You choose how broad or specific you want to go. Very interesting.
Yeah, I like this. You know, this can refresh on a periodic basis, daily or weekly. And Spotify refers to the feature as a way to curate your next Discover Weekly. For those who don't know what to prompt, there'll always be Ideas button that helps select prompts for the user.
News of the feature arrives just weeks after Instagram announced the launch of a somewhat similar feature, allowing for you to tune your algorithm on Instagram by adding and removing topics based on your interests. Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri wrote on Threads about that.
Yeah, so I think that's a really cool trend, you know, whether it's social media or these DSPs allowing you to sort of tweak that algorithm. I like the sound of that. A couple of things before we jump into the big stories, Mike. One is we dropped the episode with Jeff Halliday. He's from Downtown. He's their artist and label services SVP of global marketing. And I had a chance to sit down with him and talk about all things Downtown and developing artists and AI and everything. It was a really great conversation, so don't miss that. And lastly, we heard about these layoffs this week. Mike, you and I were just talking about this. Some really great people were let go under the Penske umbrella, and that includes Rolling Stone and Billboard, and unfortunately, a couple of our friends, including Glenn Peoples, are being let go. And I would just shout out to Glenn and anybody out there who's looking for someone who knows how to do, analysis and knows the music industry. You won't find anybody better than Glenn. So hit me up or hit Glenn up if you have his info. I'll make the connection. But it's never fun to hear about these layoffs, especially right before the holidays.
Nope, and you and I have both been through this a couple of times, and it sucks. It absolutely sucks. So very sorry to hear about that. Before we get going, Jay, we got to thank our sponsors. As we like to say, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and big thanks to our friends over at Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing, how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It is edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Jeremy Young. Hypebot is published and supported by the live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
Yeah, Bands in Town. Now over 100 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist services platform connecting over 700,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates to over 4 billion music fans across all platforms.
Yep, and every week I get to hang out with my good friend Jay Gilbert, music industry consultant, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups, and a good friend of mine for more than 20 years. We met when we were 5 on the kindergarten
It was a long time
playground.
ago.
Yes,
I remember those days at Universal. We'd go grab lunch and we'd talk about music and what bootlegs we had or
you had, so I could borrow them.
It was so crazy. I get to do this show every single week with my good friend Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, cool label, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group. And Mike, before we hit record every week, we get to sort of catch up on the week and what's coming up and what records we're listening to and all of that stuff. And we talked a little bit about NAMM this year, and we're both going. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll probably see if we can do some types of interviews there. But for those that don't know what NAMM is, how would you describe NAMM?
Wow. Well, it stands, the NAMM that's not the acronym. It stands for the National Association of Music Merchants. This is really where all of the musical instrument industry gets together. And I think it's the oldest trade show in the country.
Wow.
It started in 1901 or 1902, back when it was just player pianos and stuff like that. But it's grown to be just really this worldwide event, and it's fascinating how many people show up for it, and artists, and it's fun to just kind of gawk. I mean, I bump into Stevie Wonder every time I go there, and it's just very cool stuff. And it's the most interesting trade show because you'll see like cellos. Like a booth with beautiful cellos, an instrument that's been around for 250 years. And then next to it will be like a DAW, digital audio workstation. So there's the technology of today and the instruments of yesteryear. And I see so many friends and a lot of people from the business there. It's a blast. It's a really great trade show.
Yeah, last year I did a panel on merch.
Yes, you did.
And it was really cool. And I bumped into Leland Sklar from Immediate Family and many, many other things. But you and I will be connecting at NAMM. So let's jump into the stories. Our first story this week is from our good friend Glenn Peoples, Billboard. And the headline was How to Market Old Artists. Well, a lot like marketing younger artists, a survey finds. So this survey is from consulting firm Bain & Company. And it looked at the importance of both new and traditional media in breaking artists across demographics.
Right. So should a record label have different marketing strategies for developing acts versus established legacy artists? Probably not, according to the results of this new survey from the consulting firm, again, Bain & Company. Whether it's a new artist or a familiar one, people will discover music through roughly the same diverse set of online and offline formats, the survey found.
Yeah, this is a little counterintuitive. It's not what I would have thought. No. So in the survey, Bain asked U.S. music streamers who listen to music weekly how they discover new music from both familiar and unfamiliar artists. Instead of finding a diversity of responses, the answers were pretty similar for both scenarios, says Matt Keith, a partner at Bain and a co-author of the report about the survey. In other words, social media platforms, digital service providers like Spotify and YouTube, radio, and personal recommendations play the same role in informing consumers about songs from new artists like Alex Warren and new releases from older, more familiar artists like Bob Dylan.
Yeah, and the results were surprising in another way. Keith says Bain went into the survey expecting to find that a small group of discovery methods had risen to the top across the various age groups. But the results instead showed a great deal of diversity in how consumers learn about new music, encompassing DSPs, social media, TV, advertisements, radio and concerts, and other channels. We no longer live in a monoculture, and people are discovering music through a diverse range of channels, says Keith. It makes it much harder for our clients to try to break through the noise and find where their fans are.
Yeah, to no one's surprise, social media scored very high. It was listed among the top 3 discovery methods. 65% of 18 to 24-year-olds, for example. The only demographic to rank social media as their number 1 discovery channel. It was also an important discovery tool for other young demographics, being named a top 3 channel by 59% of 25 to 34-year-olds, that's social media, and 51% of respondents under 18. But social media's influence trailed off with age. So the older you get, the less it mattered. 43% of the 35 to 44-year-old group, 34% of the 45 to 54-year-olds, and only 21% of the 55 to 64-year-olds and 15% of respondents over 65 named social media as a top 3 discovery channel.
So DSP-created playlists, not social media, ranked as the overall top channel for discovering new artists, with 56% of respondents placing these playlists in their top 3 channels. For teens and 25 to 34-year-olds, DSP playlists were the number 1 source of music discovery, outranking social media, which was number 2 in both demographics. DSPs are also popular among older age groups, but Keith says the gap between DSPs and social media is wider for the older demos.
Yeah, that's a little surprising. The importance of DSP playlists differs by type. Playlists that are personalized by the DSP ranked first, personalized, with 31% of respondents naming them a top 3 discovery channel. Genre and mood-based playlists created by the DSP were named by 24% of respondents, while just 14% of respondents named DSP playlists created by influencers or a public figure. I would have thought that would be the other way around. That's interesting.
Indeed, yeah. So recommendations from friends, family, or a trusted community member were named by 29% of respondents, beating industry awards, 10%, and trusted critics and publications, just 8%. When it came to digital platforms, TikTok videos were named by 20%, followed by YouTube and YouTube Shorts at 16%, and Instagram at 14%. Movies and TV shows were each named by 18% of respondents, while video games were named by just 6% of respondents. Live settings had some of the lowest scores, with public places being named by 14% of respondents, followed by advertisements at 11% and concerts or festivals at just 9%.
Yeah, that really surprised me how low trusted critics and publications, you mentioned 8%. Traditional marketing channels are more prominent among older age groups. Radio was a top 3 discovery channel for 45% of respondents over 65, 36% of respondents in the age group 55 to 64, according to Keith. Older consumers also watch more TV. Streaming is more popular amongst younger consumers, so radio and TV for the older folks, and are more likely to be influenced by out-of-home advertisements. Across all respondents, radio was named a new music discovery channel by 24% of respondents, less than family or friend recommendations, but more than any single social media platform. And that's surprising to me too, Mike, that the power of radio still
there. Still there, exactly. Figuring out how to market music is increasingly important when discovery is fractured and a deluge of music is released every week. Approximately 100,000 new tracks have been distributed to streaming platforms each day, and music companies must compete against a deluge of AI-generated music. Frontline labels in the business of breaking new artists are experimenting with marketing, says Keith, while owners of catalogs, whether financial investors or traditional music companies, are trying to learn how to market more effectively. He says we're talking to them a lot about what actually can move the needle.
Yeah, super interesting piece.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know what, it's sometimes what's old is new, and, you know, it's just some of the classic things that we always done still resonate.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Last week I was talking to a friend of mine who's a music marketer, and she said that people forget about email and that it's not super sexy, but it still works really well. Capture that email address of your fans, and now you've got this relationship. And she said it's still super, super powerful. Our next piece is from Tom Roland at Billboard. The headline was How Country Songwriters Are Combatting and Adopting Artificial Intelligence. And Mike, this one hit close to home because I work with some songwriters, and I've been seeing this coming on the Suno side with the songwriters. So the sub-headline is Nashville wrestles with AI music after fictional artists hit the charts, raising concerns about creativity and industry standards.
Right. Suno is the AI music tool most often deployed in Nashville, used primarily to speed the process of production, to serve as a sounding board, or to spur new ideas for creatives who find themselves stuck. The evolving perspective on Music Row held that AI productions were appropriate tools to build the demos that show a song's creative potential. Under that code, Suno music wasn't meant for retail consumption.
Right. And even Brantley Gilbert said, if you use it as a tool, it's one thing. If you use it as a whole vehicle, that's another. That hasn't stopped the average consumer from using Suno in that way. The company claims that every 2 weeks, its users, primarily males aged 25 to 34, they churn out as much new music as currently exists on Spotify. Much of it, however, is uninspired.
No, well, Tyler Rich observed anything that AI has ever spit out to me is usually just super formulaic. He says, but there might be a word, like one word in the verse, that I keep that flips your brain somewhere else. I have no problem with that. I think it's a great tool, but I can't imagine AI writing a song that's going to get played on the radio.
Well, not yet. While the average Suno consumer is under age 35, the country creators sampling the tool span a wider demographic range. Adam Wheeler, who started a songwriting career over 2 decades ago, and his recent recordings by Megan Maroney and Zach John King, used Suno for the first time this fall to create the supporting music for a demo of a song he had written. An artist placed the song on hold, so the AI arrangement was at least strong enough to frame the actual material in a favorable light.
Right. Well, Suno isn't an automatic success. Writers frequently run their songs through the platform 3 times or more before they get a version they like, and even that version will likely need some adjustments. So songwriter Dallas Davidson, whose songs include Play It Again, Tonight Looks Good on You, said, I use Suno when I'm by myself and I just want to hear something. He said, I use it for the production, but then you still got to go tweak it.
Right. The technology raises obvious fears. As it develops, Suno could draw from the existing body of a recorded music to develop new songs and put a dent in the income of real people who devote their professional lives to music. Even more immediately, the embrace of the technology by Nashville songwriters and producers could harm the development of aspiring musicians.
Right. Playing on demos is a traditional path in studio work, and the rise of automated forms could limit those recording opportunities. Hunter Girls said they're kind of the soul of Nashville. What they bring to a song is just so valuable, that being, of course, the studio musicians.
Right. And assuming the quality of AI recordings advances as quickly as AI images have, it could become near impossible to distinguish between live musicians and artificial sound within the next year, making it even more tempting for creators to increase their use of faux voices and instruments. That would certainly impact the economics for Nashville's creative talent.
Still, musicians have fended off mechanized music before. The drum machine, for example, was considered a threat to real drummers when it was developed in the late 1980s, but many drummers simply adapted new skills and treated program sounds as an extension of their art.
Yeah, and Dustin Lynch said, I've been doing this long enough. We didn't have streaming. We didn't have social media when I started. We didn't have drum tracks to write to. We didn't have any of the editing software we have, and we just weathered it just fine.
Yeah, creators are hoping for some mix of legal protection and industry self-regulation, not only for the benefit of music pros, but also for the general public, which arguably has a right to know when the music it's ingesting is artificial.
Yeah, well, Hunter Hayes said, at the end of the day, we're making the music for other people. To me, if we're talking about protecting anything, it's the integrity of the thing that we're making because of the people that we're making it for. We owe them a human conversation, so I want to make sure that it stays at the heart of it. And that's a really good point. But Mike, you and I have talked about this a lot over the last couple of years. My songwriting clients in Nashville have been using Suno for a while now, and it's mostly in that demo creation where they upload their guitar track, their piano track, and then they'll go through a dozen different horn sections or string sections or whatnot, and they break this all up into stems, and then they bring it back down, and they'll sing their vocal over the top of it. So they're not using it as a text prompt to create a song. They're using it as a tool to expedite the production process and to save money. Unfortunately, as this piece from Tom Roland points out, that's going to affect people's livelihood because there are people who make money by making those demos.
Right, and as the article said, that's kind of a stepping stone for folks that want to be session players in Nashville, and you start by working on demos. And the other thing that was interesting about the article was talking about kind of running it through multiple times through Suno and really kind of massaging it to get it to put something in there that you suddenly like. Yeah. And, it's not set and forget. And I think a lot of these kind of things that are being uploaded to DSPs are just kind of people just set and, just doing it once and it's all artificial. Whereas this is really kind of working with the platform to really get what you want. And again, it's not that much different than using a drum machine and a sequencer when you're writing. So
right, or that, or loops, or beats, or using a synthesizer. I just think if you use it in that way, and it sounds like a lot of these professional songwriters already are, I see nothing wrong with that. I think it really helps them to perfect their craft. It just gives them another arrow in the quiver, another tool to use. But they also point out in this piece how, it's changing so quickly, just like AI images did. The first AI videos and first AI images we saw were a little wonky, and you could definitely tell they were AI generated. And I was just looking at some images this week that a friend of mine sent me, and the AI images look like photographs. I'm a photographer, and I couldn't tell. I'm looking at this going,
scary good.
Yeah, scary good.
Scary good, exactly. Well, our final story is from Daniel Parris at Stats Significant. Do music stars write their own songs? A statistical analysis. So do pop stars write their own hits? And if not, who does?
Yeah, this was such a great piece, and there's so many cool charts and graphs in there, and it refers to our friend Chris Dallariva, who we've had on the podcast. And it starts off with a bit of history, and it starts off with the Hit Factory. In the early 1960s, popular music ran through the Brill Building, right? This innocuous structure in Midtown Manhattan was a hit factory where songwriters like Carole King, Jerry Goffin, Neil Sedaka, they wrote dozens of Billboard charting songs, including Will You Love Me Tomorrow, I'm a Believer, and On Broadway. The Brill Building's mechanization of songwriting mirrored an assembly line system where producers pairing lyricists, composers, arrangers, and vocal groups to produce commercially oriented singles.
Right. Artists like the Drifters, the Monkees, and the Shirelles topped the Billboard charts with tracks written and arranged by an assemblage of then anonymous Brill Building staff. This model of music production emphasized systemization over the talent of any one star.
And then, as quickly as the Brill Building took over Top 40, it receded. This sudden decline can be traced in part to a group of mop-topped Liverpudlians, the Beatles. The Beatles and other mid-century rock bands popularized writing and performing their own material, diminishing the appeal of an outsourced song production.
Yeah, so by the early 1970s, the brill building machine and similar outfits had largely died out as the industry shifted toward artist-written albums. In the 5 decades since the brill building's decline, popular music has continued to evolve at breakneck speed. Genres have come and gone. Think disco, ska, and punk. Streaming has upended monetization and discovery, and the very notion of pop stardom has shifted dramatically.
Yeah, it sure has. So how has music authorship adapted to this constantly changing landscape? Do today's chart-topping artists write their own material? Or has a brill-building style system quietly replaced the rockist ethos popularized by the Beatles? So in this piece by Daniel Parris, he explores 70 years of songwriting trends and evaluates how song production varies across different forms of music stardom.
Right, and here are some of the highlights. So do music stars write their own songs? In his book Uncharted Territory, Chris Dalla Riva traces the history of popular music through works that have topped the Billboard charts. To do this, Dalla Riva compiled an extensive data set cataloging every number one hit and key attributes related to the composition, content, and authorship of these tracks. Most relevant to today's analysis, the data set includes detailed songwriting credits and each artist's involvement in producing a track.
Yeah, so today we examine how often chart-topping artists contribute, that's the key word here, to their own songs, and thus earn songwriting credits. We see a steady rise in authorship that now approaches nearly 100%. It's like 93%. So how is artist songwriting involvement higher today than it was during rock's commercial peak in the 70s and 80s? The answer hinges on how writing credits are assigned and how one evaluates authentic artistry.
Right. Beyond initial songwriting credits, the dataset also flags when an artist is the sole songwriter or producer on a track, an occurrence that peaked during rock's commercial apex and declined as the genre receded from the mainstream. So, number one hits where the artist is the only songwriter or producer. Well, boy, it sure has gone down since basically the 1970s dramatically. So what explains a rise in songwriting credits for pop stars alongside a simultaneous decline in solo authorship and producing? This curious shift reflects what we'll call the Max Martinification of Top 40.
Max Martinification. So who is Max Martin, you ask? Well, if you don't know, it's a prolific Swedish songwriter-producer whose invisible handiwork has delivered chart-topping hits for Britney Spears, the Backstreet Boys, Kelly Clarkson, Taylor Swift, The Weeknd, anybody we've heard of, and many others. His quiet dominance reflects the rise of the anonymous guru hitmaker with impeccable commercial instincts.
Right. Well, scan the songwriting credits for recent Taylor Swift or Sabrina Carpenter releases, and you'll see familiar names appearing alongside the artist, including Max Martin, Jack Antonoff, and Dr. Luke.
Yeah, this trend is partly rooted in the decline of rock and the classic singer-songwriter tradition. Genres that produce top 40 hits, known for distinctive solo songwriting, like Carole King, Joni Mitchell, Hart. Yet this shift also goes beyond genre preference, signaling a larger resystemization of the modern hit factory.
Right. Well, the old brill building has given way to the top 40 music guru collaborator, a trusted, deftly skilled, usually male, songwriter-producer who can engineer chart-topping material by pairing an artist's brand and vocal strengths with a sticky commercial sound. For record labels and artists alike, bringing in Jack Antonoff or Max Martin mitigates risk, ensuring Sabrina Carpenter's next album performs exactly as expected.
Yeah, and if you look at some of these charts, Mike, you see that a solo songwriter is definitely on the decline, but the performer being one of the songwriters is on the rise, right?
Yes.
And, if you look at the top 100, I think the average number of co-writes the last time we looked was 7, right? It's a team effort today. They have people who are trained and very skilled at writing hooks or choruses or verses. And it is definitely sort of a team effort. So these were just some of the highlights from the article. It's a deep dive, and it's a great piece. Check out the entire article, and you'll love those charts. And that's in your morning coffee.
Yeah, really interesting. And that's always been kind of one of the mysteries of the business, which is, did that person really help write this? Or like in the days of Elvis and other artists where artists or artists that did not write their material had leverage to say, well, I'll record this, but you have to give me some songwriting credit. And so I don't know how much of that still exists.
You know what? A lot of it still exists. And remember when you and I went to the SONA Award, Songwriters of North America, there was a very interesting speech. And in that speech, the gentleman said that this still is a problem and was warning songwriters, do not give somebody songwriting credit. If they were a studio musician, they're not a songwriter. If they're a producer or engineer, they are not a songwriter. And I remember that speech because it revived that argument for me. I didn't really realize that was so rampant. I mean, we had heard of one popular female singer who I won't name that was accused of saying, listen, I'll record your song, but I want to be on the songwriting and get some of that publishing money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's still happening. I'm going to take a wild guess and say it's probably happening more than you know. Yeah. Well, it is time to wrap up the show. We do want to thank everyone for listening, and big thanks to our sponsors, Hype and Bands in Town. We certainly appreciate their participation. Music was by the Licorice Quartet. And if you did like the show, please tell one friend. My good friend Jay and I would certainly appreciate that. So, on behalf of that good friend, Jay Gilbert, I say thanks for listening. I'm Mike Etchart, and we'll be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.